What if the very leadership style that made you a success at work was actually destroying the thing that you value the most? 20 years ago, Emmanuel Hernandez-Agosto was a self-described command and control leader, and this approach almost cost him his marriage. Today, as the Dean of Business at St. Petersburg College, he's undergone a total 180-degree transformation into a humanistic leader who's recognized as a resource for his team's fulfillment. And in this episode, you'll learn why success at home is the greatest predictor of your performance at work and how to transition from solely managing metrics to leading with both head and heart. And if you've ever felt like you had to choose between your career and your family, Emmanuel's Fork in the Road story will show you a way to find fulfillment. Emmanuel, welcome to the Life Fulfilled podcast. Let's get right to it. When we had our prep call, the first thing that you said in this conversation, in this story, was that you needed to begin by decluttering the noise. Let's start there. What do you mean by that?
Of course, Bernie, and thank you for the invitation and having me. So, when I was an associate dean, that was my first management opportunity. I was young in my 20s and, ready to go and take on the world and show what I was capable of. So you had a lot of noise, basically a lot of people that actually kind of told you what were the things that were appropriate as a manager. So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, so culture had a lot to do with it and how people actually worked. And supervisors look through their different employees and execution. Most of the role modeling that I had was about, that command and control approach that you described. So it was kind of hard to filter through that, and definitely it gave me a little bit of a hard time because at heart I wasn't that person. I was more of a sociable kind of relationship building person that I could actually build an emotional connection with people, and that was my leadership style outside the office. In youth group, in community relations. But I guess there was an expectation of how I should be and who I should be as a leader. And we did have success. We achieved the numbers. We were one of the top competitors within our organization in terms of productivity, but it was at the expense of the team. I would say maybe morale and maybe some self-esteem. So definitely it took a toll on them more than me. And that's something that definitely I would say that it was kind of hard to get rid of because everything else said, no, you're doing the right thing. But the actual, signals the team was giving me was a complete opposite.
Okay, so it actually sounds like you were a bit performative. And this leads me to the next topic that I wanted to discuss with you that you mentioned. And that is, you said that during this phase, and you were still in Puerto Rico, if I remember correctly, from your storyline standpoint, you
Yes.
had sort of that command and control approach that I mentioned in the introduction. So why don't you elaborate on that? What was that command and control phase like for you?
Well, that was a period where, again, being a young executive, rising through the ranks, I was very goal oriented. Being a young person carry a lot of weight because, of course, there's a lot that you have to prove yourself and prove to others that you're fit for the job. So having to work with managers that were twice, three times my age sometimes, and having to prove myself and actually supersede some of the goals that they had, and I was able to achieve that in a fraction of the time. I kind of built a little reputation, so it kind of validated or gave the sense of validation that I was doing was correct, right? And again, most of the leadership books at that time always kind of also said that, hey, command and control, it's a good approach. We were transitioning with more humanistic uh, components in terms of leadership, more visionary leadership, more inspirational leadership. But a lot of them really were not taking a hold in practice. Yes, you will see that at the C but middle management, lower level management, most likely we're still, let's measure by the numbers and the metric.
How many years ago was this?
I will say almost 20. Yeah, because I'm
Okay.
about to turn 44. next week.
Okay.
And that was in my 27, 28 years of age, and I was managing older people than I was. So culturally speaking, there was an line also that actually I should have deferred to in some instances and provide that respect of wisdom. And but again, being a young, ambitious person with a little bit of maybe self-centered at the time, I didn't value some of those things.
So I think, Emmanuel, the obvious next question that, if I can read my listener's mind, is what was the catalyst for change? You used the expression fork in the road. What was that fork in the road for you?
Well, that was my wife. So, as you mentioned in introduction, I was a go-getter at my job, and like anything else, I didn't take too much time to, I guess, have the same ambitious goals with happy family and happy wife, all those things. We had a young child at the time, a toddler, and I kind of really didn't pay too much attention to that. Was too much focus on the house, and part of the bringing usually is, well, as a man you're supposed to provide, and as long as you're providing, you're doing your part. And if you need to sacrifice a little of family time, then so be it, because you're fulfilling your role as a male. And that wasn't necessarily correct. So it definitely created some friction in the relationship. Those middle years of my daughter I kind of missed. Now that I have a younger child, I have a son, I was able to be there during those years, so I can see all the stuff that I missed. And she just said it very plainly. You have to decide what's more important, it's either family or the job. So I chose the family. It actually pushed me out of my comfort zone to pursue other opportunities that I wanted to do. And I will say that thanks to that fork in the road, actually, I grew, one, as a professional and as a leader, but two, it actually brought even better opportunities, both, professionally, personally, financially.
Okay, so I know that part of your story then, as it's unfolding, as you're sharing this journey that you went through, did include a transition to the U.S. mainland, from Puerto Rico to the U.S. mainland, and I know that that had some impact on you both from a career standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint. Talk to that transition from Puerto Rico to the U.S. mainland, and that cultural transition that you experienced.
Puerto Rico, its main language is Spanish. We learn English since we were in elementary school. But culturally speaking, since we were a Spanish territory for so many years, we kept that as part of our culture. So it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid. So when we moved here, having to understand those particular regional characteristics, the different rituals and traditions that we didn't grow up with, I had to kind of learn those. And then also when I was teaching, because I came for a faculty position, I had to embed that in my teaching style as a way also to respect the heritage and the different geographic traditions that we had where I moved to. And I think that was one of the first steps towards also transitioning and improving my leadership style, because being someone that, as they call it where I moved, they said I was a transplant. So anyone that wasn't born and raised in the community basically was a transplant. And of course, it was a big military community, so they had tons of transplants. And having to earn a little bit of that respect from the community and also their love, because it was a community that really welcomed me, and like anything else, what we were going through that process. But it was a great opportunity for me to really experience we saw a lot of the time on TV, and validate some things and discourage or discard others. But most important, to understand the cultural elements of which region do we belong to, how can you become part of that community, what's important to a community, and what modifications you have to do to honor and respect that community.
Now, today you are the Dean of Business at St. Petersburg College, which is in the Tampa Bay area in Florida. And you use an expression that I use, and neither one of us are the original author of this expression, and that is a head and heart leader. It's certainly one that I've embraced in the context of my fulfillment centric leadership work that I do. and you've embraced it just in terms of your approach to leadership. So maybe you can speak to, given the story, the journey that you've just shared with us, that whole backstory that really led you to your head and heart leadership approach today. Wanted to unpack, what that really means for you in your current role.
So it's something that, again, it goes back to family. So in that regard, kind of makes you reflect that with your team or your employees, in a way, it's kind of the same. Yes, people need to work. Yes, people need an income. But at the end of the day, it's a relationship. And like any relationship, it's a choice that, we both decide to be here. We both decide to come and do the best and contribute the best. And we will have our differences, but we're still making a choice to make this work. And that's how I approach my leadership style, right? Definitely, I use the metrics. Those are not going to go away. And when I work with my team, I really look at the human first, and I try to understand, what is it that they're going through, right? Because I have multiple generations in my team. So some of them are caregivers, some of them had, spouses pass away, children pass away. And no one kind of teaches you that in business school, or at least not as much as I think it should, especially when you're on a younger generation managing an older generation. And being open to having that, I guess, holistic view of your team and your employees as an actual human being that, really has all their needs beyond the job. It's critical. And for me, understanding that I need to address those things first, even though I'm not a social worker, and, again, this is a job. If I take care of you, you will take care of me. And by taking care of me means, you will do the best to your ability to ensure that we achieve those metrics. And by default, the institution or the organization will be better off.
You said something that I want to come back to, and I just want to add my commentary to it. You're right. It is not the job of a leader to work through their employees' personal issues, challenges, that sort of thing. But certainly from a head and heart standpoint, in what I call fulfillment centric leadership, just acknowledging the human side and provide having some conversation, maybe pointing them to some resources that might be helpful to them, and then just taking that approach, just as you said, working with them as humans first. I call that, see the human before the role. And so it sounds to me like you're absolutely doing that. And maybe you can kind of elaborate on that a little bit, and how your team engages with you as a result of your head and heart leadership approach.
So let me give you an example. For example, in my earlier career attempt as an associate dean, I will have employees that will tell me, "Hey, man, I have a doctor's appointment, it's just an hour," but they didn't have enough leave time, so there was no exception, there were no uh, leeway or flexibility. Now, I just find a way to, hey, if you need to be out for health reasons, we will work it out. And if I need to actually help you on some of those things or find a resource to make up that time while you're out, that's fine. So I try to see on the positive on how do we gain some of those areas. And again, it goes back to it's a commitment, right? You give me your word that you're gonna perform at this level and you're gonna commit to do certain things, and I will trust that you do that. So in order to build trust, you have to give trust, really. And I think that's what we have done in the past 3.5 years that I've been in the position.
That's great. Anytime I'm having a conversation with someone about the head and heart leadership, it's interesting how people sort of hone in on the heart part, which is great, but they think that you're compromising the head part, which you've used the word metric many times in this conversation. That's the head part, right? You are managing to metrics. That's the head part, but you're also balancing it with the human, and that's the heart part. And I love that. It's a great example. So I really appreciate the fact that you're sharing your story. Where I want to go next, Emmanuel, that my whole approach to head and heart leadership through fulfillment centric leadership is based on the 5 life pillars, right? Health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. And you've done some interesting sort of integration. You've got career and relationships very intertwined. Why don't you just speak to that briefly? How are you intertwining or integrating career and relationships?
That's one of those things where I was lacking, I would say, in as part of my development professionally and personally. And I didn't have any time for myself. I wouldn't do exercise, I wouldn't do anything related to fitness. And that was an area that I kind of found out that outside work, and of course my family, I didn't have any relationships. So once I started to commit to do more like sports, I was able to actually build a social network that it actually helped me release a lot of the stress and some of the other things that kept worrying me. Kind of give a break to my family too, so that way they will have a break from me from time to time. But I wasn't actually connecting the dots that having that me time was actually allowing me to find ways to connect with other people. And believe it or not, there's a lot of people that do kind of the same sports that are professionals. And as it happens that when you're trying to build a relationship with someone in your actual role, you can actually start to pick up a better common point for bonding. In my case, I played pickleball, and as it happens, a lot of people my age and older, which usually tend to be in executive positions, are doing the same. So it's one of those things where, well, if you find those common points where you are actually enjoying, the conversation will come natural by default. A little bit more of a trust, or people will feel a little bit more comfortable sharing some personal items that eventually will help creating that closeness.
Yeah, especially when you engage in real conversation around that and you remember that. So if they say they share a pet's name or a family member's name, and then 3 weeks later or whatever, somewhere in the future, you ask, hey, how's, and then you mention the family member's name or the pet's name. And when you're doing it authentically, as in you really care, people know that. And that relationship really strengthens the bond between you as their boss and their role, and that has an impact on their performance. So you've already touched on the integration of the career and relationship pillar. You also have touched on the integration of health and fitness into your overall journey. The last pillar that I want you to comment on is the legacy pillar. How are you redefining, so to speak, your legacy?
Well, that's very interesting because we did have at the office that conversation. We were talking about transitioning and kind of like exit planning. Not that I was thinking of leaving my current role, but I was telling the team that something that I really wanted to build was a system in which whatever changes we do are somewhat permanent. So it doesn't matter who comes into the chair, that will stay there. And the only way we could do that is by having them actually take ownership of what changes they want to do, what changes they want to stay and keep on running. And that actually sparked some good conversation because then we're talking about how do we do things that are not necessarily removed or prevented from us to do from higher leadership because right if higher leadership changes then maybe the vision changes a little bit and then that will trickle down. So it helped us understand really what matters to the team and how do those things that do matter will still carry on forward with what we started and in terms of that vision. And I think from a legacy perspective, that's what I've been focusing on. Something that I know I'm not going to be here forever. Actually, administrators on average their tenure, it's an average of 3 years for deans. And college presidents are going about 3 to 5. So the industry has moved in higher ed that you have your deans and your college presidents with shorter terms as part of their tenure in that role. So that means that, faculty actually tends to be a tenure between 15 to 20 years. So imagine that a faculty member most likely will be there and will see at least 3 deans in their tenure, if not more.
Right.
So we're working on that right now, but I can see now kind of infusing a little bit of fire in their eyes and wanting to really do things because they know that, hey, whatever we do, it's gonna stay, and we're gonna find a way that whoever comes in it's gonna have a little bit of a hard time taking it away because usually a lot of that is attached to funding. So if we find, alternative funding sources, if the funding keeps coming, we will be able to keep on doing it.
Well, Emmanuel, your journey from command and control leadership style to someone that today is leading with head and heart is a powerful reminder that success, whether in career or outside of career, it's not a trade-off. It's really an integration. You've really shown us that the real metrics of leadership aren't just the metrics that are measured in performance reviews or promotions or just other KPIs that you're responsible for reporting on, but also in the quality of relationships and the clarity of how you show up for your people every day, and then the impact that you're having, the legacy that you're leaving every day, not just in the future, but even today. And I just want to say to my listener that if you have ever felt like your ambition was at odds with your home life, or that the noise of achievement was maybe drowning out what really matters to you, well, I think Emmanuel's story that you're hearing today is really an invitation for you to declutter the noise, to lead with your whole self. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you, since I am the host of the Life Fulfill podcast, to remind you that fulfillment is not found in the corner office or whatever status a career role might be. It's really built at the intersection of the five life pillars that we discussed here today: health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. And Emmanuel, I want to thank you profusely for coming on the podcast, sharing your story with us. It's really been inspiring. And where can my listener connect with you if they want to just connect with you and just kind of get into your world?
Of course. So, well, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. So if they actually search my name, Emmanuel Hernández-Agosto, you will see me there. If not, you can look me up in St. Petersburg College. So if you go to Google and just type SPC Emmanuel Hernandez, that will be your first result.
Fantastic. Well, Emmanuel, my listener knows that all that will be linked up in the show notes for this episode. So again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks to you. Have a great day.